Yeah, so we're starting this session today. It's a Sunday, so it's a teaching Sunday. Just to put on record, we will at times record it. The start of each session, we read out what are called the ground rules for the forum. Yeah, and they're the Pellin ground rules that have been around for a very long time. About people being able to say no and being in control and not gossiping. Occasionally when we're doing the recording, I think we'll record the ground rules and the opening. We are continuing with the theme of, purpose. Over the last 3 Sundays, we've looked at the last 3 Sundays that we've had together. We've looked at the different levels of purpose: superficial purpose, underlying purpose, and broad and sustaining purpose. We've also looked at how purpose is a crucial source of feelings of accomplishment. And we've also mentioned the fact that the relationship between feelings of accomplishment and sustaining purpose was actually the start of all this material, because David Pellin saw a connection that he felt quite sure about between people in homes for the elderly, where he works as a physiotherapist. He saw a connection between them not getting feelings of accomplishment and having strokes. So the whole start of the work was the elderly not getting feelings of accomplishment. And his next point in his thinking was they're not getting feelings of accomplishment because they don't have purpose anymore. So that was actually the start of this work. And as Mary knows, because I work with her mum, in her last years, that part of this work that someday, not in the too distant future, I'd like to get back to, the application of this work to the elderly. And I guess I feel I have something to contribute from the place of being one myself. And what we're looking at, so that's just background. What we're going to look at for the next few weeks is the relation of purpose to other Pellin tools. And what we're looking at today is the relation, how does the pendulum fit in with purpose? One of the things we can say very clearly and very strongly, the pendulum, just on sheer survival country, gives us a chance to protect our purpose, because extreme pendulum swings can threaten our purpose. It is often the case that life, the gods, the stars, our own mistakes will often set up will often set up threats to our purpose. And those threats will be accompanied by extreme pendulum swings, swings to compulsive highs for some of us, swings to compulsive lows for other people. And that's just life, okay? Life will come along and take away our purpose the way the coronavirus can come along and take away somebody's life. It might be a change in the political climate, regardless of what regardless of what particular politics someone belongs to. For a lot of people, politics is a very large part of their purpose. Politics might well define their purpose. And, when the Berlin Wall fell and communism fell, almost melodramatically undramatic, okay? There are hardly any lives lost. It wasn't a war. It wasn't a revolution. And the way it's referred to is the Berlin Wall fell. Well, the Berlin Wall didn't fall. They just opened the door. I mean, that's what happened. They opened the gate. The wall came down some weeks later. And when that happened, a whole lot of people in Eastern Europe and in what is now Russia, their purpose was about teaching Marxist-Leninism. That was their purpose. That was their underlying purpose. That was their sustaining purpose. And all that just came to an end. There's a quite famous photograph somewhere of someone who was like a cleaner. It was a man with a sort of duster in his hand, sort of cleaning, dusting a whole lot of, they were just lying on the ground. They weren't standing up anymore. But statues of Lenin, okay, that had been standing up and were now lying on the ground. And his job was sort of dusting them to keep them clean, because I guess people were trying to work out what they're going to do with them. And that was quite a staggering example about history coming along and taking away people's purpose. Something similar in the southern states of America when they lost the war. And of course, they put together the Lost Cause, but their purpose was gone. And you could say the pendulum swings around that are still happening now. Generations later, people objecting to their purpose being taken away from them, because their purpose was in a set of values that were defeated in war. And it's happening even now. I didn't realize how much, but now the statues of Robert E. Lee are being taken away. And they're going to be put somewhere, and I guess someone's going to be cleaning them before they've decided what's going to happen to it. So outside forces can take away even sustaining purpose, okay? And they can certainly take away underlying purpose. I guess it would be a good argument. It would be a use of the Pellin tools. I don't know how much influence it would have. To get your shot, get your vaccination, because that's protecting your underlying purpose. It might even be protecting your sustaining purpose. And almost just to stay with that particular situation, we can see the odd sort of power of superficial purpose and the pendulum in, people wanting to party, wanting to, go to sporting events, wanting to gather in large numbers at close vicinity, and people almost saying they can't live without that. Young people almost thinking they can't live without partying to save their life. That's the power of superficial purpose. Superficial purpose is entertainment. And partying and shopping, in some way traveling, vacations, and different sorts of partying, from a family barbecue to teenagers going wild. And the power of superficial purpose, which I guess is very much demonstrated there, is those sort of small, I don't mean small, vivid feelings of accomplishment that don't add up over time, but at the moment, someone's getting the feelings of accomplishment out of superficial purpose, the risk is worth it. Whether the risk is unsafe swimming on a vacation, or running up too much money on the credit card. The pull of superficial purpose, because of the immediate satisfying nature of the feelings of accomplishment, that's all about pendulum swing. That's all about highs. And it can almost be a vicious circle, that the high which threatens underlying purpose, the high that someone's in superficial purpose, okay, that high will threaten their underlying purpose, whether it's driving too fast and having a bad I'm just stopped for a minute. My daughter in Canada had, I was going to say a bad car accident, and my daughter in Canada day before yesterday had a bad car accident. So when I came up with that example, that she's okay, and the kids are okay, but it was a bad accident. So when I came up with the accident example, it sort of shook me a little bit. Yeah, you know, that the pull of the to the compulsive high from the superficial purpose can threaten the underlying purpose. Yeah, examples are sort of obvious. You know, someone goes to a party and sleeps with someone that is not their spouse, and that blows everything up. You know, someone gets so, and I guess I don't know, you know, I almost don't have modern examples, but people who make mistakes on social media by putting the wrong stuff there, you know, whether it's naked photographs or personal information or provocative statements about work colleagues or offensive statements about politics. You know, when people, young or old, put the wrong stuff on social media, they're doing that from a high in the main. Sometimes they'll be doing it from a low, which is sort of full of you know, bitterness and nastiness. But people are not putting the self-destructive stuff on social media from the calm of the pendulum. They're just not. That's for sure. So what the pendulum does in this context, it gives us a chance to protect our purpose. It gives us a chance to protect our underlying purpose. Okay, this is a delightful flirtation, you know, I'm having with this person, but, you know, I've got a husband at home, I'm going to get out of here, or I'm not going to have another drink, or I'm not going to smoke any more marijuana. No, that's the pendulum protecting the underlying purpose of the marriage and the family from the pull of, you know, to be sexually tempted is just human. But it can be very destructive of purpose. And, you know, the mistakes that, well, the mistakes that church people can make in particular, from, odd to put it in this context, and I want to be sensitive about it, but the, you know, the sexual temptation of priests, which has been going on forever, and if I'm right, was written about extensively by Saint Jerome. That's not new. And I mean, you know, I think we rightly talk about the abuse that happens in the church as something that is evil. I think it's the right word, and particularly as it's covered up. And covered up when everybody knows about it. I don't think there's any doubt, going back to the founding of the church, which we know the date, you know, 2,000 years ago, you know, when those incidents occurred of what we correctly call pedophilia, people knew that was happening. for hundreds of years, people in the church establishment knew that was happening. There's no question about that. But I say I think that is evil and should be seen that way. But I am someone who's worked both with victims of sexual abuse and perpetrators of sexual abuse. And the priests who crossed that line, they couldn't resist the temptation, right? And it was a high on the pendulum. In the calm of the pendulum, particularly that part, if you might remember, I'm developing that I call a low calm, that's in the calm but on the low side, where we have it's a tougher place than the calm itself, because it has a sort of edge of, it has a real edge of sort of resignation, being a bit close to bitterness. It's a pretty good survival spot. But the priest, young or old, who could get into the calm of the pendulum would not have committed the child sexual abuse. What I call psychopaths are in fact very rare. They can commit the crimes in the calm of the pendulum, but they're very, very rare. Most people can't. So they're rather extreme examples, and I'll try to bring them down to run-of-the-mill examples as well as the extreme examples, or the historical applications. But if I have purpose and enthusiasm about the writing projects I'm working on, the book on decisions and the book that me and Dave, Portrait of an Inspiration, I've got a lot of typing to do and I've got a lot of rewriting to do. And they're not particularly, in my experience or skill set, but I've got to do them. And I can get into them. And then when I get into them, I get enthusiastic and I get high on the pendulum. So I have Mary knows all that. I have a really good day and get a lot done. And then because of my particular enthusiasm highs, and you know me, you'll have a sense of that. My particular enthusiasm highs can be quite high, quite in the compulsive high. And then I can come from there down into a low where, and it's funny for me, the low is, I sort of, on the one hand, I rubbish myself and I set very unrealistic goals. It's quite a big high. So it ends up being a big low, okay? So the idea is just, okay, I had a good day yesterday. I typed up 3,000 words, had a really, really good day yesterday. Okay, I'm just going to type up 300 words today. And that is so hard for me to do. I almost think the only thing I can do is me at my sort of absolute best, which is cause nonsense. So I don't get anything done. So I have a really good day and then days, and, I'm not proud of this. I don't want to make it a joke, but it can be weeks or months of not being able to get back to it. And all I need to do to get back to it is, small steps. But difficult for me, really difficult. And that, that process of those enthusiasm highs to procrastinating lows, both quite extreme. Because when I am in the enthusiastic high, I feel really good, and I do, in reality, I get a lot done. But it's a bit like heroin. There's nothing wrong with heroin, except the lows are inevitable. Inevitable. So I'm a bit shocked to say that, because if I take that into myself, if I get into those very productive but extreme highs, I'm going to hit a low where my procrastination is not just a drag for me, it's a drag for everybody else. And that's all about the pendulum. Now, if I was doing that whole process in and around the calm or in the tolerable area of the pendulum, I could have a good day, a very good day, and then because I don't hit that deep low, I can say, okay, now if I work sort of 4 hours yesterday, it's okay if I just work an hour today, or half an hour today on the writing, or 15 minutes on the writing. No, I don't, but in my sort of high, in this combination of high and low, yeah, it ends up being sort of all or nothing. And, purpose is a persistence. It's almost perseverance strata, if you remember that. Ability to handle disappointment and failure and rejection and betrayal, all the stuff that lies in perseverance strata. Purpose, whether it's underlying purpose or sustaining purpose, that's the long haul. We're in it for the long haul. So for me, Peter Fleming, I need some work habits that are quite steady and aren't dramatic. I'm not telling some brilliant idea here or elsewhere. I'm just in a steady way plodding along. That's what I need to do. I did some Gestalt work years and years ago. The practitioner was a student of mine called Alan Jones, and I was the client. And he got me into being my plodding civil servant, okay? Because my first career, and from 17 to 24, I was a civil servant in Australia. And he would get me to, go back to that place. Who was he? And that's the middle of the pendulum. That is the middle and tolerable area of the pendulum. So the pendulum can protect our purpose. And if it's like me, I've been in the field a long time. And, so I've got a lot of experience to draw on. And if I can be in and around the calm and I'm plodding ahead with a bit of writing, I think, okay, where is it going to go? And I can't quite get there. Well, what would it be like if you did, half an hour's typing today and then put some white paint around the windows? I really like painting and decorating. It can be really true rest for me. Yeah, what would it be like to do that? Or what would it be like to get out and go to Starbucks? I've got all the experience, okay? I got all the stuff I could draw on. But when I'm in those extreme swings, I can't draw on that stuff. Anyone like to come in? Cynthia.
Well, actually, what you're saying describes me a lot, but I do almost everything you're talking about too with myself. But one of the things I think this is really important because, you know, when you hear people, or at least, and I don't know where this comes from, but there's this whole sense that you got to find your passion, and your passion means that you're sort of, and basically, for in Pellin terms, it would seem that this passion mean you got to find what gets you high. And it's all the time, and the thing is that sometimes I judge, and I think that's one way I get very hard on myself. I judge what I can do from what I can do in a high, and and I can accomplish a lot in a high, but I can't sustain it, and then I get into a low and get nothing done. And Yeah, so I think that this is something, the slow and steady is something I need to keep working on too, which I'm not great at. But um, you know, well, yes, and then, but then there's another thing. Then I set myself, and you know, and I'm doing this. And I noticed yesterday, and I finally had to, you know, slow down on this. I'm doing this in the game I'm playing, Animal Crossing. You know, there's lots of chores you can do. It's kind of an open-ended game, and I set myself. I realized I set myself up a ton of tasks where this whole game was starting to become a burden, and I'm like, what am I doing this for? You know? But I notice I have that tendency to feel like, I don't know where that comes from, but this tendency to feel like if I'm not, you know, where I just sort of take on things and take on things and take on things until I can't do them. And then, and I think that may be, you know, from a high eh, thinking, instead of thinking what can I get done from a high, and then I get to the feeling, well, I can't do anything, because then I think, as I get a low, I can't get much done. But I need to start thinking about what can I accomplish during the calm, and set my goals based on that, not, you know, not from the high or low, I think is it. But you know, the whole concept of your passion, and I think that happens with people getting divorced too. They think that when they've fallen, and you know, there's a whole literature, and I used to think about that when people are in love, but it's like when they stop being in love is when they can like really get down to the business of loving each other. And I think, but people think that, but I think that might also be a pendulum thing. You know, the high of the initial falling in love is gone, and it needs to go at some point, and then it goes to a low. But people, you know, but there's a certain place where we're loving from the calm. um you know, it's not as exciting, it's not as, but I think that's where what lasting relationships are based on. So anyways, this is just giving me new language for things that I've thought about, well, at least with the love part, with the relationships part, with the work part, it's actually kind of new, and you it's like, yeah, so I need to, because I go into those swings where I get a whole lot accomplished, and then I can't do anything, and like even any little thing yeah, it seems like a major project. So thank you.
Yeah, I want to comment on one thing. Well, a couple of things you said there. One of them is, I think what a lot of our work is, and what a lot of Dave's work is sort of putting, you gave me other words to think about it with. And I think that's what we provide, a framework, often something that people already know, okay? And that's why at times I like to call it codified common sense. People already know it, but this helps them be more sure. Almost, I think it helps people be more sure about their own common sense. I think that's often happened with this material. And, you know, find your passion. That's a part of me. I've been writing about this today, actually. In my me and Dave portrait of an inspiration, and I was going way back to a philosophy teacher I had in Australia, a man called John Anderson, who, if he hadn't been in Australia, if he'd been in Europe, in England or America, I think he would have been very famous. But he was in Australia, you know, before and in the 20s, 30s, and middle part. But he was a huge figure in University of Sydney, and I studied with him. And in fact, and I was so pleased. Give me half a minute. I was so, because I just researched him on Google. You know, the absolute sort of wonders for book lovers and thinkers of the, you know, of this age. Because, you know, I got 2 books that someone's put together. I mean, and that, you know, this one was before I was born. I studied with this guy, and he had a big effect on me. You know, this one was before I was born, but I think he gave the same lectures. And just to be able to find them and get them and order them and have them delivered. And, you know, this is Australia, okay? It's not even England or New York. But anyway, that's a digression. But I was writing about it because I feel that, and the part I was writing about was just a bit of transparency. I was writing about today that I feel that John Anderson gave me a real, trained me to have a good critical mind. He regarded, in philosophical terms, he regarded criticism as a fundamental attribute. You know, he almost, you know, he almost regarded it as the good in the humankind to be able to be critical. And he trained us in that. And I felt he gave me that. And the relevance of that is how I come in with Find Your Passion. The other one I feel goes around to stay in the moment, okay? No, don't stay in the moment. Go and get a vaccine, okay? I mean, you know, I feel, and I feel within Gestalt. So anyway, I was a critic. I was a critic of Gestalt. I was a critic of where I worked. I was a critic of I felt there was something absolutely wrong in the social work profession, that the person who got most prestige and money was the administrator, not the person who could work best with the most difficult clients. You know, the senior person in the hospital is not the hospital administrator, is the best brain surgeon. And I worked in a field where you could be brilliant, but to get status and reward, you had to become an administrator. It didn't matter if you were brilliant at turning around, you know, kids who are headed towards violent crime or saving lives, the way I've seen Nan and her staff where she previously worked. I've seen them do it, you know. But no, you've got to be an administrator. And I just thought the model of the profession was wrong. And that's changed a little bit, but only at the edges. They now have senior social worker or senior practitioner or something, but it's at the edges. that prestige is being the executive director of, period. Anyway, that was the John Anderson bit in me, okay? And the John Anderson bit in me is also, you know, find your passion, stay in the moment. It lacks rigorous thinking. Yeah, sometimes that's great, you know. But, you know, the only people who can really have a good marriage are the people who start their marriage with a passion like Romeo and Juliet. There is no evidence anywhere of that fact. Okay, none. A lot of different ways people start. So if I can bring that back to my lesson plan, you know, what we have with the pendulum is being able to look at those moments. Yes, if someone falls in love with, like Romeo and Juliet, that's awesome. There's no question about it. It's one of the most sort of wonderful things in the world. But it's not everything about love and about marriage. It just isn't. And you might be interested in looking at part of the journal, the manual, sorry, called Love, Sex and Affection. I've touched on it here. But Dave was real clear. Love, sex, and affection, very powerful in starting a relationship. They will all change and they will go away and they will change between two people so they're not in sync, okay? You know, every time I try to give you a cuddle, I feel you pull away from me. You don't love me anymore. Are you seeing somebody else? No, someone just at a time when they don't need affection. And then he came down with the thing that holds a relationship together over time is communication and refuge. Good stuff. And I think bring that into purpose, find your passion, yeah, you know, the chemistry between two people is just hot and marvelous and, you know, the subject of a million popular songs. It just is. But it's not all of it. So someone who can find their passion, okay. And sometimes this is the other side of purpose and the pendulum. At times we need those big highs. Just the times we need the attraction, the passion, the lust. You know, sometimes we need that. Might need that to start a relationship. We might need that to find we're capable of love. But it's not all of it, okay? And in terms of purpose, we need some of the highs to give ourselves a vision of what we're capable of in this purpose. I can do something with Pellin. You know, I had a vision of Pellin, of David Pellin, like nobody else. Yeah, and there's certain high in that vision. And we need that, just we need the high of falling in love. And at times we need the low to almost find out the good side of our perseverance strata, okay? It's like grief. Or someone who's got the low of their husband or their wife being overseas in Afghanistan. You know, and being, you know, scared of the news. Someone might well have to hit a low to find the determination, I can stick this through. And that person will stick it through with small feelings of accomplishment. They will do that. Let alone the lows that the COVID has thrown people into, because they've had someone they're close to die. And then behind that, which again is the parallel of a plague to war, which from memory, if I'm right, the Spanish artist Goya drew that parallel between the plagues they had and war. Because of the wonders of modern science, a lot of people wounded in war would have died, but now they live. But they live with a lot of challenges, medical and physical and emotional. I would say, I want to say this slowly and with respect, that the people who make it through that go through and sit out a very deep and very horrible love. I think her first name's Tammy Duckworth, the senator, who's lost both her legs. The way she articulates and the way she's got her, her career and her passion going, okay. I'm a bit critical. I'm John Anderson. I guess they look rather stuffy, don't they? He had a very strong Scottish accent. Let's think that through, what find your passion means. And I imagine it was not where, I've got her name right, I think her first name's Tammy. I imagine, she could talk about it because she's a good politician. If someone says, well, Senator Duckworth, what's your passion? She could talk about that. But that's not the way she got there, okay. Being pulled out of a helicopter, she was expected to die. She lost both legs. And now she's a United States Senator. She didn't do it by finding her passion, and she didn't do it by staying in the moment. And I reckon she came through must have come through some terrible lows, sat them out, got support. But she couldn't have kidded herself that no, she couldn't have kidded herself. It was going to be hard, that's for sure. So, we would say it's a balance. Find your passion, but realize that's a high. And how do you feel about it when you're in the calm of the pendulum? And how do you feel about it when you're low? Man?
I'm shaking my head at my dogs. I'm sorry.
Oh,
they're in there begging by their treat drawer.
Okay.
It's like yeah, they know I overfeed them to shut them up when I'm
Right. No,
too.
they,
Yeah.
they don't know that. They remember the time when I was there and I'm not a dog lover. So you're objecting to that. They're objecting
They're maybe
to
objecting
me.
to you.
They're objecting to me, Nan.
Okay.
Do you want to say anything about this stuff, Nan?
You know, I just find it, it's really been on my mind, I think, because of participating in this. And really, yeah, I mean, I think it's really important material. And I do think that, as practical as it is, the challenge for me is translating it for people. I just got an email yesterday about a family I worked with, and this guy is tanking, and he's going to lose all unsupervised visitation with his kids. And you have to think beyond whatever issues he might have. He has totally abandoned a sense of purpose in his life. And because you can't chronically tank like this, you know, and I know he's not psychotic. I mean, they asked me, I'm like not the best diagnostician in the world. And Mary, you probably understand this. It's much more intuitive for me. And so I don't necessarily think diagnostically, but he's not psychotic. He's not, you know, anything that would prohibit healing. And yeah, so it's got to be this loss of purpose. The only other thought I have is that part of the horse gig for me is that it mirrors my desire to help people and mirrors my sustaining purpose of learning something new. So anyway, yeah, that's what I mean, I think this is the purpose stuff of this is, for me, perhaps the most profound in terms of what it gifts to the people who grasp it.
I think because you've said this before. Oh dear.
You're back.
Yeah. You've said this before. I think we need to develop something. You know, how do you translate it into that? Now, direction with the training cards, you know, the workbooks. That's one direction, making the material accessible. But I've never, and you know, people who've trained with me know this, I've never been attracted to or good at the flip chart and using the flip chart to get the people in the group to talk about where they are, right? I've come from a different place, which, by the way, was also what John Anderson did. He just stood up there and gave lectures, and we took notes. With very, very old-fashioned. And David Pellin did the same thing. So those influences on me, but I think, you know, a weakness in Pellin, we don't quite know how to use the group, to use those technical terms, as well as some people do. And I think the whole thing that's being talked about now, I think could be really useful to us. This whole sort of challenge that if you're going to get through to these people who don't want to take a jab, you've got to come from where they are right now.
Absolutely, in the absolute most existential of ways.
Exactly, and whether it's Joe Biden or the governor of Alabama, when she said we're going to blame the non-vaccine folk because it's their point, and the way I could go down that road. I could really go down the route of, pardon the expression, but let's take the fuckers on. I could absolutely go down that route. But then really reading at what other people are saying, if you do it, the Biden way or the governor of Alabama way, you're going to increase the opposition. Now, if we go back to when I did the work for you with the first responders at Coleraine, if I got the name right, County. The first time, I tell this story, Nan, and I must give it. That was the first time and only time in my very long career, very long, I'm proud of that, where I was introduced by the chief of police with a gun on his hip. Okay.
That's right.
He wasn't in uniform, but he had a gun on his hip. And he was the chief of police. I think we've got to find a way with Pellin to come from where people are. Cynthia.
Actually, use the language that's when I worked at, I didn't work, my spouse was a pastor. Well, I was a pastor's wife, so I did a lot of work with the church. But one of the things they talked about was meet people where they're at. And I just thought of a funny way to do that. And I think you just said those words about before that's what I was thinking about. But one of the funniest example in terms of vaccine that I think is really funny, I don't know if it's the funniest, but a real funny one that's happening here in Illinois. They're doing a lottery where you're automatically entered if you're vaccinated. And I laughed, like, in Chicago and because there's a lot of people who play the lottery. It's a big deal. So I just laughed. When I think they're doing it in Nevada too, because my mother-in-law lives in Las Vegas. But yeah, I thought that was hysterical. I'm like, yep, that would convince.
Yeah.
I'm thinking, if my grandmother was still alive, I know she may not, because the Republicans were against it. She was, if President Obama told her to do it, she'd do it. But other than that, she wouldn't done it. But she would do it to enter a lottery. I know that.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think going back to, and then how do we do that? How do we come from where they are? Now, interesting, because if I just get into why David did that, and I think it's got a bit of what Stacey Abrams said about how you get people registered. I think it really being where they are, and what Dave would do with that, he'd sort of taking something I'd present him with. Now, he had his own style. And, you don't understand threat to authority, and then he'd give me a lecture on threat to authority. I'm not saying, that's the approach, but it's a bit absolutely being there where they are, and then, this tool might help you. And it's got to be something like that. And going back to Stacey Abrams, I was really, because how much I study and follow United States politics and all that. And I was just absolutely surprised by what she said. You don't go out to register voters. That's not what you do. You go out to tell people how important the vote is. That's your first step. Your first step is not the second one, it's the first one. And I thought, wow, am I learning something from that? So, and I guess we got passive listening, okay? So, and in a way we got passive listening, we got our ground rule. And that means we're just taking in where someone is, where someone's at. And do you want to hear about something that perhaps could help you think through the situation? And then, you know, because one of the reasons for the ground rules is to keep us honest, particularly the ground rule of no. You know, would you like to hear that I've got the material that I think could help you in that situation? And then when they say no, we've got to listen to the no. And then hope for another day. I don't know how you quite translate that to people are going to die unnecessarily because other people won't get shots. But all the people who know a hell of a lot more about it than I do say it is not going to work if you're pushing. It's just not going to work. And then there's one little bit I almost just through seeing movies, I realized, I said, look, if you're going to knock on their door, you're talking about rural communities. So you're going to walk onto their property to knock on their door. Do you know what that means? You know, all these sort of scenes out of movies came into my mind. You know, it's not a set of apartments in a city or a town. It's someone's property in a rural county. So, you know, I think we could learn something about that, how we meet those people where they are. Cynthia.
I was reading an article talking about vaccine resistance and some studies about people who've changed their minds, who weren't going to get the vaccine and then decided to do. And one of the biggest factors was their friends got it and they talked about it. It was far more important that their friends got it. They told them about it. There was no side effects. And the other one is now people are seeing that millions of people have gotten it and are fine. So, you know, but those are the biggest, it's people's friends.
Yeah. And I think that's where, in terms of relationship stuff and the manual working with Nan, I imagine there's a lot of isolation there. I guess, you know, because men don't talk that stuff over with their buddies as much as women do. So he's not hearing from a best friend or a cousin over a glass of beer that, look, you know, what about the kids? How are they going to see you in 4 or 5 years' time? But I guess that's Cynthia.
You know, actually, what you were saying, when I was a divorce lawyer, there were times if you really needed to convince somebody something. And it was nicer when I was in the firm and, you know, there was men and women in there. You know, sometimes they either need to talk to somebody of the same sex or the opposite sex. You know, sometimes, you know, I would tell my boss, you know, it's like, you know, I think he just needs a man-to-man talk, you know, or, you know, or just need to talk to a woman about it. And I think that's, but yeah, there's a real power. I found this a lot, particularly when I see when you know, the man-to-man talk really works for some people.
Mm.
I do think when we do, whether it's warranted or not, tend to, you know, there's still this kind of male culture thing that I do think sometimes a man can say something to a man that just totally means something different because it's coming man to man. So, I mean, I find that with women, that I can say things that there's a presumed kind of identification or credibility or something just by my gender.
Mhm. Lesson plan. So what we're looking at with the pendulum is, and I think this is where the power of the tools in terms of when they're put together, okay, connection between them. That the pendulum can really give us a chance to expand and solidify our purpose. You know, we can take a sort of, yeah, it's a, sleep on it, take 2 steps back. How's it look from 30,000 feet? All those sort of statements that are stepping back from the swing to a high or a low, and then just looking at it and thinking, yeah, this is something I want to pursue. And I think those tools are important because I am critical, John Anderson in me, I am critical of find your passion, and I'm critical of stay in the moment. And I was I was critical, and it was sort of an open dispute. And I don't know how it would have gone had he lived, not died, with Fritz Perls, because he said, don't push the river, go with the flow. And I said, look, I work with people who, if they don't push the river, they'll drown. Okay. Because I feel those statements are often made sort of with the assumption you've got a supportive family, you've got a place in society, and you've got a good career. So you can stay in the moment. You can follow your passion. With people who are struggling with it.
Staying in the moment isn't great if the moment is awful.
Exactly. And maybe, and I was mocked. And as I mentioned another time here, I don't take mocking. My memory links about profound, boo-boo, profound, okay, when I was a kid, by my friends. So, mocking triggers off memory links, that's what I'm trying to say. But, I sort of mock, oh, there goes Peter with his purpose, future stuff. And that was pretty heavy mock because, Pearls was, well, I think the narrowness, the lack of rigor in a lot of the major thinkers in my field. I mean, that's sort of my stance as I'm writing about Dave.
Peter, too, a lot of it came from a very elitist mentality because that's who availed themselves of these therapy opportunities. It wasn't your regular, like they would criticize Carl Rogers because so many of his patients were university students. So I do think, like you guys are saying, it's like, don't push the rivers, fine if you've got a paddle in a canoe. If you don't,
exactly.
You may need to do so. I think that is some of this, our history is rooted in thinking that was developed among people who did have an enormous amount of privilege, to use today's phrase. Not that they weren't traumatized, but that they had a natural web or network, or if you think of strata, they tended to have high social strata.
Yeah. Cynthia.
Yeah, just to go on what Nan was saying, when taking Indian astrology course, and the instructor for that says, money. You talk about reading the chart differently if you're reading for somebody who's of middle class or higher than somebody who's poor, and says money solves a lot of problems.
Yes. Yes. It's funny you said that, because having, being someone who's gone through divorce, and I used to say, I reckon divorce is a time where being really rich really helps. You can fly off to the Bahamas and you can lie in the sun and you can spoil yourself. And if you're like me, spend too much money on books and pay the excess airfare for your luggage. I reckon in some situations of pain, being filthy rich, I reckon helps. I reckon it helps.
Actually, I would say, having been a divorce lawyer for people who are very rich, because I worked in the firm, and for them who are very poor, actually, the problem is with being very rich, there's a lot more to fight about, and there's a lot of other people who are making money keeping the fight going. So
that's interesting. No, that's a lovely, thank you. That's a lovely piece of information, really. Yeah.
Nobody's going to encourage, well, some people, it takes a lot of integrity for a divorce lawyer to encourage a multimillionaire to settle.
Say that again.
It takes a lot of integrity. And you do. That's one of the things you're taught to look at, because there's an inherent conflict of interest if you're being paid by the hour. So it's in your client's interest to settle things, get things done quickly, and get it over with. It's really in the lawyer's interest, if you're just even thinking financially, to spend as many hours as possible on the case, as long as you're going to get paid. But and that's something you have to be aware of, because you could fall down some really nasty ethical traps if you're not aware of that. But if you've got, it's, if you're really poor, that's hard, because you don't have, you don't have some of the supports. You don't have psychologists, particularly if you're dealing with custody issues. But if you're poor, you can't get into, well, you can if you get attorneys who will do it for you, or you're doing it pro se by yourself. But you can't get into a personal property battle, like where you're fighting over the salt and pepper shakers. You just can't do it. You're not going to get somebody who's going to do that for you for free. But it's hard. To be quite honest, actually, I would say with divorce, that was one of the things that I learned, was actually it was the greatest. You'd think that people who were rich had it all together. What they can get is they can get more support, but there's also having all that support also means that you don't have it's people who are middle class. The people who are really poor tend to get it for free. The people who are middle class are the ones who have to say, what is this really worth fighting about? Because they're not getting support helping them. They're paying it themselves. And, okay, is this worth, 50 hours of an attorney's time at $200 an hour, or if you get a fancy attorney, $400 or $500 an hour? Is this worth that, or can she just have it? Just forget it. And it's hard, but so surprisingly enough, even though I said that money solves a lot of problems, it does. But as rich people, filthy rich people were not any happier than super poor people. And no matter how much money people have, they never thought they had enough. So anyways, I'm sorry.
No, I find that really comforting to know that piece of knowledge from you. Yeah, I really do. You know, looking on to next Sunday when we're going to do Purpose in the Life Forces, I'd sort of like to end up here just looking at the importance of the pendulum in being able to give us different visions of our passion, different visions of our purpose, and that means we can let ourselves have, say, the pleasant highs of enthusiasm. I talked about that quite a bit here because of me. But the unpleasant compulsive highs of, 3:30 in the morning and, it's all going to fall apart. I'm in a battle or I'm in a need to survive and I'm not going to make it. Those I am not going to make it thoughts that I think can be very fearful, panic, and that can come in at 3 o'clock in the morning. And then both of those highs lead to lows in, some of us have just a negative fog. I think there's a phrase coming out of long-term COVID. I think it's called a mental fog. It's just sort of another way of talking about, slightly different way of talking about Alzheimer's. It seems quite frequent with long-term COVID. So, some of us have a sort of negative mental fog. Other have precise points of factual negativity in which, yes, I did that wrong and that wrong and that wrong and that wrong. Or that person never supported me or whatever, we'll come up with a constant stream of ways to put ourselves down and again, be very fearful of our situation. But the extreme high can give it, even the unpleasant one, can give us a sense of what we're capable of. And the low one can give us the determination to keep going. Sitting out the low and realizing when we got a vision from the high of the pendulum, that we're going to have to check that vision out in and around the calm. And that means we can look at our passion from a number of different angles. And we can check it out in a number of different angles. And, just to give one example of the difference between the compulsive low and the tolerable low, in the tolerable low, we'll say, yeah, I'm feeling pretty lousy about this, but why don't I check it out with Nan? Okay. I'm still feeling lousy about it. But why don't I check it out with somebody? In the compulsive low, we'll say, we'll go isolated. Or we'll be attracted to people who are as negative as we are. Misery loves misery. The compulsive low, and this in terms of purpose can give us a real take, And I think we can, you know, drawing the parallel again to relationships. And I think it's something, you know, women are better at than men. Okay, I'm going to talk it over with my girlfriend. What does she think? So that gives us a different take. The pendulum gives us a number of different perceptions of our purpose. Okay, we'll stop there for today. I'm in Norfolk, east coast of England. It's 7:30. Nan?
I'm in Cincinnati, Ohio, and I'm Nan, and it is 2:29.
Okay. Cynthia?
Cynthia in Kankakee, and it's 1:29. And I
Okay.
really appreciate it today. This gave me a lot to think about. Thank you.
Yeah. Mary?
I'm Mary in Rosarito Beach at 11:30 in the morning.
Okay, well, thank you so much for coming. On Wednesdays, we'll be doing examples about this. And I think they can be really rich. We're getting into the richness of the material now. Because, okay, you know, we got purpose. Someone's purpose is in their work, in their career. You know, okay, how can the pendulum help with it? You know, how can the pendulum help with the office politics that might destroy a career, or the new funding that may make openings come up for a career? Okay, guys, thank you very much. And I'll see you on Wednesday. Bye-bye.
Bye.